I'll start by welcoming you guys tonight. My name is Natalie Fritz, and I am the archivist and director of outreach. I think now I can't remember what title we landed on as far as new titles go. But a lot of what I do in my job is help people up in the library and archives when we're back open. I've been spending this month trying to get things clean and neat all up in the library and archives to get a good start on 2023 up there. So I help researchers and work with volunteers doing projects. And a lot of what I get to do is find great pictures. And we have one of our volunteers, Barbara, comes in 3 days a week, and she scans a lot of the photos in our collections to give us stuff that we can share in the newspapers, online, and all over the place. This is a good chance for me to share something all from one subject. We do these virtual programs. We've been doing them. We did them really frequently starting in 2020. In the last 6 months to a year or so, we've kind of slowed down doing them a little bit less frequently, but we have lots of topics that we could share from our archives. And when I'm looking for pictures to share in the paper, I'm often trying to line stuff up with anniversaries or big events that have happened in our community to share them around the same time. Or if I share anything on any of our social media channels like Facebook. So this was one that the last 2 years we've had programs specifically focusing more on the 1978 blizzard, because we know everybody out there has that's lived through it, has stories to share no matter where you lived. Even if you weren't living here in Springfield, people on the East Coast area all had stories to share. So our programs the last 2 years focused on that. But this year we decided to broaden a little bit and just talk about general natural disasters, man-made disasters, fires, different things like that we have represented in our archives through newspapers and photos and ways that we can tell stories. So that's what we're going to look at today. As with all of our Zoom programs, we record them so people can watch them later. They're available on our YouTube channel and then also on our Facebook page about a week after or a couple of days after the programs. And before I continue, can you guys hear me okay? If you guys can type in the chat if you're having issues with any of the sound. I'll try and see if I can figure out what's going on if there's an issue. But right now I've pretty much muted everybody. I did a mute all just to so we don't have any background noise. But this is a kind of program where we want you guys to jump in and share stories or share anything that you want to add. And we're happy to get more information from you, because whenever I do these programs, I always want to start with telling people I am not a time traveler. I don't have memories of any of this stuff. I'm not even from here. I've been here for almost 20 years now, but I've picked up a lot of what I know just from researching in the archives and learning from all of our great volunteers and people that I've met in town. So I decided that the best way to organize this tonight is to put it in chronological order. So we're starting out with stuff that's outside of everybody's living memory here, but you might know people that have talked about this. So if you have anything you want to jump in about or any questions that you have, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in about that. You can also use the chat function. We'll pay attention to that. And I'll move to our first official slide. This is one of the earliest things that I could find in our archives. It was an 1886 flood that started in May around 6:30 p.m. There was storm clouds gathering that delivered a deluge of rain throughout the city of Springfield. And the paper described it as a wrath of waters that flooded streets and homes throughout the eastern and southeastern parts of the city. So the picture that you see here is, if you guys might be able to recognize where it stands now. That picture down on the, I don't know if you can see my arrow there, on the right here would be Christ Episcopal Church further back down there. So this would be the bridge that runs right along High Street, where Leanne's Dairy Delight is now. That part of the bridge there, just around the bend. And a building that was heavily affected by that washout of the bridge was the Eastern School, which stands right here in the corner of the picture here. And they had to obviously close the school to students right away, but it was in kind of a precarious position close to the edge there from the collapsed bridge, and they abandoned the school, and that had been a school that they had been planning to tear down anyways, so they moved the students to other schools throughout the city for the rest of the remainder of that school year. But you can see here some of the damage on the railroad lines here, and this was the stable of Gustavus Foos on East High Street. And then we've got some more pictures from that scene showing some more of the flooding that was throughout the eastern, southeastern parts of town. And from what I read, it kind of cleared up quickly. It was just kind of a flash flood that knocked out that bridge. It was the main damage that happened there. Another one that was before we got to the 1900s was an 1892 cyclone that was July 13th, 1892. It started around 11 a.m. and the newspaper called it a destructive cyclonic horror. And this is where we can go to the newspapers for more information. It says that there was dozens injured and over 100 homes were heavily damaged, and the area is bounded by Center Street, Clark Street, East and Southern. And I've got a map on the next slide here to kind of show you where we are on the south end of town. And a relief fund was headed by then Mayor Burnett, Asa Bushnell, P.P. Mast, and O.S. Kelly headed up a committee to gather money for residents who were affected, and they raised nearly $9,000 in a really short period. And this picture here shows the one with all the people standing lined up, shows the debris field on East Grand Avenue.
Hey, Natalie.
Yeah.
The Weather Service has a term called bomb cyclone. What that is a low pressure area that develops into a hurricane almost immediately, and it moves through here like it did on the 1978 blizzard, and it destroyed a lot of places around here just before Christmas this year. And what it did was bring in a lot of heavy winds and caused some local damage around here. But it was only temporary, and it was followed by a cold wave, by a polar vortex, which brought Arctic air down to the area just behind that system for a few days, just before Christmas.
So the bomb cyclone causes the damage that we would associate with what we would call a tornado like this. So this is the same type of conditions that would have led to this then? As this one in 1892, like, is that the same kind of like cyclonic conditions, but in hot, wet weather that causes it?
It started out as a fairly modern day and turned out to be really cold behind the system, and that's what and brought in some snow behind it. Mm-hmm. And that's what it was sort of like you say, a tornadic type of a weather system that moved through here at that time, just before Christmas this past year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is this picture here shows that that area that's bounded by the one that hit in 1892, and a little bit more of the damage that you can see on those streets over on that side. So this would be directly south of where I am now at the Heritage Center, heading out towards Selma Road, and over there by Grand Avenue is right in the middle here, which is where a lot of these pictures came from. But this is part of what our volunteer Barbara has been scanning from all of the we have a whole box that's just called disasters, where we went through and we made sure we got at least all of those. Stuff comes up in other collections as well, but that box had the majority of it. This one here, a lot of people are familiar with, have heard about it. This is something we talk about in a section of the museum where we talk about changes in the history of the firefighting in this area. But the East Street shops burned. It was in 1902, and it was at the time the East Street shops were the largest shop outside of largest shop in the world outside the I believe it was Krupp manufacturing in Germany. So all under one roof. So it was out on East Street, where we have the Brain Lumber Company is over on that block now, if you're familiar with that area. But it was considered the most destructive fire in the city's history. And it was discovered at 8:45 a.m. above one of the companies in there, the Progress Furnace and Stove Company. And it was slow to spread, first burned through an attic space. And then they initially thought that they had it under control, but then the sheer size of the building and mismanagement of crews that went out there that didn't necessarily have the water access that they needed, or the water pressure was the big issue out there. So there was the firewalls didn't so the only company, from what I can recall reading about, was that survived was the Krell French Piano Company. Didn't have as much damage as everybody else. And the next fire that I'm going to talk about on the next slide that happened the following year was what led to a big restructuring in the fire department. Samuel, Chief Fulrath had been the one that was over the two fires in 1902 and 3, and they brought in a new chief, Samuel Hunter, and there was starting to move towards complete full-time department as opposed to the volunteer firefighters that there had been in the past. So this is a picture about, all the ruin that was out there, and there's a great paper about the fire and everything that it changed about it. But one of the really interesting things was that there had been a request to put another I guess, a pump out there, something where they would have better access to water and water pressure, and the request had come not too long before the fire happened, and it was denied, and it could have been something that had saved the area. So the following year, we have there was a downtown fire at the Black's Opera House, which opened in the 1860s, at the building that is now, whatever you want to call it, the Fairbanks building, the First National Bank building. It's called Hull Plaza now, at the corner of Fountain and Main Street there. The Black's Opera House had been there originally, built in the 1860s. The Opera House itself had cost $100,000 to construct, and it had a theater that seated 1,500. And on the first floor was Andrew Black's dry goods store. So in 1903, it was, let's see, the date was February. They were both in February. I don't have the date on here. Both the East Street Shops fire and the Black's Opera House were both in February. But the fire first broke out in Mitchell Brothers Plumbing, which was part of that corner block there. And it spread to the Kaufman's clothing store, which you can see here, some of the damage there, and a hardware store over there. And then there was one death, or 3 deaths. The Mulholland's jewelry store, which was on that corner, and 2 of his employees were trying to move merchandise later when a wall collapsed on them. And sadly, they were killed. But the initial alarm at the Black's Opera House for the fire was received by telephone instead of a street box, which we've got a few street boxes, those red ones, in the museum. And as with the East Street Shops fire that had been a year earlier, there was problems with the water pressure and leadership from the fire crew as to who was doing what. that helped lead to the reforms within the department. So we've got some pictures here on this slide showing the Fairbanks building that replaced it in 1906 under construction. And then the YMCA, which was down the corner on Fountain, a little bit further down on Fountain, around that same corner, had recently opened in that spot and had damage from the fire. And then this is a picture from the 1930s, the remodeled version that was there. But you can see as it was, cold weather. I saw this in pictures of the fires that they were fighting around Christmas time when we had that big storm right before Christmas. That all of the water lines, you could see them freezing as they were fighting the fire, and you could see all of the ice immediately forming on the building. So that's this is a really good picture showing that here in the middle here. This next one is a man-made disaster or a fire. This is showing the aftermath of a racially motivated violence and riot that happened in March 1904. And this is actually a section in the museum that we're trying to better tell this story as to what exactly happened there. This is something we talk about in our docent manual. We don't necessarily have it in the text that people read as they come through the museum. But as with a lot of America after the Civil War, racially motivated violence was epidemic across different parts of America, and there was racial tensions everywhere. And a lot of places were considered a powder keg of just waiting for some sort of spark to ignite something to happen. And the spark that happened here was an officer, Charles Collis, was shot by a Black man named Richard Dixon. He had been called out for a domestic violence dispute and was shot. Dixon was arrested, but a mob stormed the jail, dragged him out, hung him from the utility pole downtown, and then burned a primarily Black neighborhood that was situated behind St. Raphael's along East High Street there. It was called the Levee neighborhood. So this is some pictures from the collection showing the aftermath of that fire. The National Guard was called in. So we've got a lot more information about this story and the newspaper coverage of it and different things. And there was also a 1906 riot where another local Black neighborhood was burned. And Darnell Carter, I'm not sure if you guys know him, he's wrote his thesis about this when he was in college, and it was a very good one about the different incidents that happened here in town. So we've got a lot more information in the archives for anybody that wants to learn more about that. This picture here is from April 1907, showing a fire at the Indianapolis Switch and Frog Company. And this was one that I had to, I'm not a railroad person. I can understand the concept of the switch to between the tracks, to switch between one track or the other. But I wasn't really familiar with the frog, which is another similar tool there, but they were, switches and frogs were made here at a factory on Kenton Street. At the time of the fire, it was called Eastern Street. And this was one that was near the East Street Shops fires. But the fire was reported by a passing car around 10:45 p.m. and within 15 minutes, the whole roof had collapsed. It was most likely caused by natural gas explosions, and because neighbors had heard muffled explosions in the inside just before the fire was seen. The company at the time was owned by Charles Warren Fairbanks, who was vice president under President Theodore Roosevelt, and he's one of the three Fairbanks brothers that owned and built the Fairbanks building that was at the corner where the Black's Opera House had been. And this is one again, this comes from our disaster collection, but we have, we did a whole program just about our firefighting and fires, not last November, but the November before. We had guests from the fire department here. And we have a huge collection from Cal Roberts that has personnel photos, but also lots and lots of fire photos, whether they're training photos, but actual fires around town. There's a large collection of that we had. We've done some scanning on it, but we haven't been able to get through that entire collection. But there's a good finding aid that tells you at least what things are in there, but we haven't gotten around to scanning each of the photos in that one. Did any of you guys know about the 1913 flood? It was a lot bigger deal in Dayton and throughout other parts of the state. I always thought that it didn't have too much effect on Springfield and Clark County. The extension, the damage and deaths in Dayton were very high, and you can learn a lot. They have a great exhibit about that at Carillon Park. They have a whole building that's dedicated to the 1913 flood. But here in Clark County, it affected along the Mad River. It washed out this bridge. I think it's out by Tremont City. So the highest water in Springfield was in around East North Street and East Columbia. So like heading out towards the east end of town. I don't know if Bob's on here. Yeah, I see Flossie. If Bob and Flossie are listening, Bob was telling me that he remembers as a kid when you drove into town, there used to be something that marked the water level from the 1913
Bob's on here
flood.
too now, Natalie.
Oh, okay.
Bob's here.
He's there. Okay. I remember him telling me about the high water level mark from 1913
Right.
flood that he remembers seeing as a kid.
No, my dad, he would have been 7, 8 years old. And the high, there used to be a pine tree on West Main where the BP station is now. And the pine tree is gone, but there's a mailbox in almost the exact location. And he said that was the high water mark in the 1913 flood in the West End. And if you look out from there, out west on the westbound lane on 40, you can see the Route 40 must have been under about 8 feet of water. And he said after school was out, all the kids would get down there and they would try to grab fish for people that lived in the neighborhood, and they wanted to fish for supper, and the kids would get maybe a nickel or a dime and give out the fish to the people.
I'll have to go back through the papers and see if there's more, because years ago when I was first doing research about the 1913 flood, trying to find effects in Springfield, we didn't have all of the newspapers, and like physically we didn't have all of the newspapers on microfilm or the physical bound papers at that time. And I remember trying to go to 1913 time, and everything was after the flood. So now that we have newspapers.com and all of the microfilm, I need to go back through and find a little bit more detail about so maybe I'll find some stories like that in the papers. I know that that out in the county was affected. This New Carlisle was surrounded by water, and Tremont was basically underwater at the time. This bridge here is actually an unidentified location along Mad River, but we know that it was in the county somewhere. And then the O.S. Kelly plant along Buck Creek was flooded, and they had to shut down production. But I think that things cleared up a lot faster here. They were back to their regular schedule like by Wednesday, when the heaviest flooding was on Tuesday. Railroad service was stopped for a few days here, but one of the traction lines was able to stay open that went towards Columbus. And then people, as I know, one of the things they talk about over at Carillon Park is the huge relief effort of raising money. And there was information about how much people from Springfield and Clark County were giving to help people in Dayton and their sister city. They said that their need was more urgent than those within our own gates, so they gave quite a bit to help in Dayton. And then the repair costs here in the county were the Bechtel Avenue Bridge had damage, and that was about $18,000. And the city sewers had a lot of damage that was around $30,000 was the eventual cost to fix the sewer damage that was caused by that. This picture here actually shows the a block over from me right now, around this Regent Theater currently is 117 South Limestone. I'm at South Fountain. So this was at the building that was there before the Regent Theater was built. This was the Columbia Theater in 1917, and they were doing some renovation work there in September of that year, and a large section of the building collapsed during that remodel. The north and south walls fell, and 5 workers were killed and several more were injured. That Columbia Theater had originally been the Grand Opera House, built in 1881. And after this, they decided to stop with any remodeling. They removed everything, and Gus Sun began construction on the Regent Theater after that, which opened in 1919 out on that spot, which is still there today. This picture here comes from, we have this great scrapbook of lots of local businesses. It's got a lot of storefronts and business cards or letterhead that goes with it. We think it's from around 1924 or so, most of the pictures in there. And a lot of the pictures are by Howdy Weber's father, and his photography partner had taken a lot of pictures in town. I know Christina Kitchen's been sharing a lot of the pictures from this scrapbook on the Springfield, Ohio History Facebook group the last few weeks. But this is one that was in there for the Ray Johnson Company, and a lot of the insurance companies, you know, they wanted to advertise that they could be good for you for, you know, if you ran into trouble, if you had a fire, if you had an accident. So this was kind of an something that he used as part of his advertising. 1920, J.S. Raymond here, J.S. Raymond Johnson started his insurance business. And he was the son of a miller operator and was married to Fannie McGrew, who was Asa Bushnell's granddaughter. He tried to set himself from other insurance agents because if you look through the directories, if you look under I for insurance, there's pages and pages and pages of insurance companies and agents that were in town. And he advertised that he could provide all types of insurance: renters, tornado, fire, life, health, steam boiler, auto accidents, and more. So he would share photos like these to drum up business. And he later joined the Trump Littleton Insurance Company as their vice president, which we've got more of their advertising in a later slide. This is one that the anniversary of this was just this past week on January 22nd. This is the McCrory's department store. It was McCrory's and Kaufman's, I believe, were next to each other. But it happened January 22nd, which was a Saturday. It broke out in the basement of the Kaufman department store at Limestone in Maine. And it destroyed McCrory's 5 and 10 cent store and a good chunk of Kaufman's stock and fixtures that were supposed to be part of a new store that they were moving 1 block over for that. The earlier Kaufman store down the block had been destroyed in that Black's Opera House fire back in 1903, and they had rebuilt further down the street. But they were able to rebound again and build a bigger and better store at High and Limestone, just a little bit further down the street. So this is one of the, was able to find more information about the fire just doing a general Google book search. This showed up in a business directory from that was published somewhere, is just about this, you know, the Kaufman store and how they had been able to rebound from this fire. This picture here shows the incident in June 20th, 1924. This was made into a postcard. This is a postcard in the collection. It was the two-story building where the original Tuttle Brothers store was. That building is still there, but it's not quite this building. At East Main and what is that? Well, Spring Street now, I guess, that runs along there. But they were doing an excavation and renovation there, and the building collapsed. 3 people were injured, and one of the workers later died from his injuries. But they ended up, rebuilding on the site, and that is the, I believe it's the current building that's there now at that corner. These are postcards that pop up in different areas of our collection, but they're compliments of the Trump Littleton Insurance Company. It's another one of those instances of, showing here, keep this from happening to you. We're here for you as your insurance agent. So they would go out to local fires and take photos and develop them and hand them out like business cards at like the next fire. So it would have, information about the fire that this was taken at. This was the Springfield Union Stockyard fire. This is the Mast Foos fire in 1925. So then they'd go scratch it into the negative and be able to hand these out to people. This next one is related to that. This is another one, the Clark County lumber fire. Another one from, and you can see the photographer, Weber and Harrison, who were were taking the photos for that scrapbook. They were also probably working for, or doing these pictures for Trump Littleton to hand out for their thing. But you can see here a insurance seal that showed that people, that used to be, if you had it on your house, you were covered by that fire company. I think Jeremy Lynn just jumped on. He might, who's with the fire department, he might be able to tell a little bit more like that. But these are some things from our collection related to firefighting that we had talked about in that previous presentation as well. But this is actually, I'm not entirely sure how it works, but it's this thing itself is for firefighting. But you can see it has an ad for an insurance agency that was in the arcade building right there on the tube. I think you would pull it, rip it off, and throw it into the fire like a fire extinguisher type thing. But I remember we talked about that a little bit at that fire presentation, but I can't recall if those fire agents, if those marks were very prominent here in Springfield, that people would have to have those on their house. I know that if you go to Dayton, they have that Ladder 11 restaurant there out by University of Dayton that has a lot of the fire marks on display as part of their decor there. This one here is showing another tornado that was hit mainly in South Charleston in May 1927. There was heavy winds and rains across the whole county, but the full force of it hit South Charleston, where it destroyed several buildings and caused damage to a number of homes there. So this is, I know this says gift of Frank Braun 1980. So these pictures obviously aren't from 1980, but the Frank Braun collection was a very large collection of local photos. A lot of them, of these disaster photos that we have, came from his collection. And this is how we got a lot of that stuff. Jeremy says he's not able to join the chat, but I'm glad he was able to join us at all. Thanks, Jeremy. This picture here shows the 1929, one of the 1929 floods. This is from February 1929, February 25th, late in the evening. water went over the Bucks of Bank Creek and swept through Springfield. By later in that day, the water had already subsided enough in a lot of the area, but we know that the roads were damaged. There was some rail lines knocked out, a lot of road damage, and power and phone service was pretty much cut out across the city. And then a lot of the heavy rainfall was mixed with melting snow because there had been a heavy snow prior to that. And this caused about $1 million in damage that cut off big chunks of the city. One of these pictures here, here, this one in the middle shows International Harvester Plant on Laganda. Several hundred of the trucks were underwater outside the plant. And they had to suspend the operations at the factory. You can see this is the High Street Bridge. This is, I think, over by St. Raphael's over here. This is downtown.
This is Dick Graber back again. This is similar to what happened on this time on January 21st, 1959. We had a heavy snow before that, which piled up to around 2 feet. Then there was a heavy rainstorm that came in on January 21st, and it was about 4 inches of rain, and it melted all that snow and put it into Buck Creek. And what it did was to break a couple of bridges here in town. One on Water Street and the other one on North Limestone Street, which had to be rebuilt at that time. And I remember it very well because my father was a county commissioner at that time, and we were checking it out, and we saw all the damage that had to be repaired in the county auditor's office. And so I just wanted to pass that along, that I was doing weather reports over WPLY about that time.
Yeah, all the way back then, yeah. And that's, I mean, interesting to see the similar weather conditions, what it causes. Again, this is some pictures from the newspaper from that time, showing different scenes of rescue throughout town. But I said this was the first. There was 2 floods in 1929, and I know when we started doing a lot of our big scanning, this is kind of when we realized that we had these floods mixed up in our archives. And it wasn't until I posted some of the pictures from the 1929 flood, not really thinking, not really looking at them that closely, I guess, where someone said, wait, are those kids swimming in February? And I was like, wait, yes, they are. They are, in fact, swimming in February. So we said, so this, and there's leaves on the trees. So something's not right here, but these are all in our 1929 flood folder. And that's when we realized, oh, there might have been more than one flood in 1929, and we've just mixed these all up in one folder. So one of the ways that we were able to finally sort this out was scanning our photos has made it a lot easier for us to do research. You know, we can zoom in more, you can see more things on it. And the fact that just about everything is online now has also made it easier to do research on things. But we had one particular picture, I think it's number 5 here on the in the middle of the newspaper coverage. And we have the original photo, which I didn't include on here. But if you zoom in on the photo, you can see the marquee for State Theater on there. So, and we can only see part of the marquee, but now that we have IMDb, we could go, which is the you know, movie searching website where you can find information about who's in movies. And I mean, and they have every movie conceivable that you could think of in there. So I was able to go to Google, type in the few letters that I could read on the marquee, figure out what the movie was, go to IMDb, figure out when the movie was playing in the theaters. Then we went to the newspapers and the microfilm and scrolled through until we found that movie that we were looking for playing at the State Theater in Springfield as an advertisement. So that's how we figured out that that it was playing at the State Theater, the movie Sonny Boy, from June 17th to June 22nd. And then when we went to the newspaper, June 20th showed us all of the pictures, including the ones that we were trying to research. So it helped us label them better. We knew the exact dates of the flood. And things have changed even more. Just in the last year, they've added pretty much all of Springfield papers are now available on newspapers.com. So now I could probably figure this mystery out in about 2 seconds by going to newspapers.com and typing in flood 1929, and I would have known that it was in June without us having to do all of the microfilm research. But microfilm research is fun too. But it's just amazing how it's, helped us to find more information, and the fact that we can put the picture up online and ask people questions. There's people out there whose parents or grandparents or they themselves remember these facts, so we can help fill in a lot more details that we didn't have before. This is another blizzard that we learned more about, thanks to Patty, if she's still on here. Patty's one of our volunteers who has donated a lot of stuff from her family's personal collection and processed that collection. And they have all sorts of stuff. We're involved in lots of things in town. So whenever I say, oh, Patty, I wish we, or say something like, I wish we had something like this, she says, oh, we have that. And she'll bring it in and donate it. But this was a thing that she had about 1936 blizzard in January. This was a little poem about the blizzard written by Margaret Gordon. This helped us to go find it in the newspaper to get a little bit more information about when it happened. We know that it was sub-zero temperatures. I think this talks about it at some point. It hit -20. I imagine, I don't know, Dick, you might have to tell us, I don't know when wind chill, how long wind chill has been a thing. Has that always been a weather thing to have the wind chill, or if this was an actual -20 that they're talking about here. But we know that because of the storm in South Charleston, a 75-foot icicle formed on their water tower that just went straight down from the top of the tower. And we found a picture of that in the newspaper going through stuff. So thanks to Patty for helping us, drawing attention to this one that we really didn't know anything about. There might still be some people around that have some memory of this, but they would be quite old at this point. But yeah, this is about the same week right now. This says that January 23rd, it was -20, which I don't know if that's the real temperature or not, or the field, but interesting story. This is one that we ran across, and people in the 40s might remember this, that we learned about that the police officers were tasked with having these safety talks or safety outreach to people. They were the ones that would work investigation on crashes like this one here in the paper, but then they would try and educate people more about traffic safety to prevent accidents like this. And this one here, this is the flipped one, but this is from the same accident, the other one in the background. The car was at Schaefer in Columbia, and the whole feature in the newspaper was about the safety squad of the police department. And the crew was Detective Charles Scott and Patrolman Luther Doman, and they were working with day squad member John Swords and Carl Belcher. Well, actually, those are the evening squad, John Swords and Carl Belcher. So they would investigate those crashes. But this is one that I ended up being able to use for a then and now submission to the paper, because I drive down Columbia every day on my way to work, and I saw this picture and I was like, hey, I know that house, the one in the background here. So I went to Google Street View and put in the block that I thought it was in, and found the exact house. So I was like, oh, if I send this picture of the paper, they can find the block. And this is the other side now, is where the U-Haul is at the old Bushnell School building. But this was an interesting thing that I wonder if, hopefully they helped prevent some accidents by talking with people. These pictures here show a October 13th, 1946 train wreck, where a New York Lines refrigerator car carrying margarine came off the tracks and plowed right into the lobby and took down some upper floor rooms of the Francis Hotel, which is where the library is located today. The weight of the car caused the lobby to fall through to the basement. Luckily, there was only minor injuries, and the 100 people that were staying at the hotel were able to stay at other local hotels or with friends, so they distributed everybody out. But this, as you can see from this view, you can see the Marketplace Heritage Center building across the way here. And I thought this was a really interesting story. So it's one of the ones that a few years ago we decided to recreate it with Peeps, which this is a springtime tradition that I do with some of my volunteers that have worked on Wednesdays. They're not all coming in on Wednesdays now, but last year they still came in to do Peeps with us. But every year we pick a picture or something from Springfield history that includes a lot of people, and we recreate a Peeps in history scene. So you can see my crew goes into a lot of detail for this. They actually made built the boxcars and built the house and printed the bricks to put on the hotel and made the bed and everything. And we were even printing out. You can see over here we had printed out lots of different wallpaper so we could put wallpaper on the guest room. And we had lots of spectators watching it happen. And we had people with cameras and people with hats. And I think we had a new intern that was starting that day or a student from Wittenberg. And I told him, I was like, here, sit here and cut out hats so that we can put on Peeps. It's like, what have I just gotten myself into? So if you come this spring, you'll see whatever scene we're going to work on this year. But this was our 2019 scene. Is there anybody out here that remembers the 1950 blizzard?
Yes.
Yes. Carol, I think that was you. This one hit right after Thanksgiving in 1950. And until, I think you're muted, Carol, if you're trying to talk. I can see you talking.
Okay. My brother and I were playing out of that blizzard until it got really bad. And my whole family, my mother, father, and brother and I, walked from our house on Fountain Avenue to St. Rayfield Church. And we were probably the only people there. But it was kind of exciting for me at that age. I felt like a pioneer.
Well, I see you see lots of people. You see people walking in these pictures here because the cars are buried.
I can
downtown.
remember it also. That was the first year I had a job, and you see Philip's store there in the right-hand corner of the big picture. You see the word Phil?
Yeah.
Phillips? Okay, that's where my first job was, and the buses weren't running or anything. And a girlfriend of mine and I walked from our place in the southeast end of Springfield down to Phillips, and we and the owner of the company were the only ones that appeared to work that day. we're just teens.
I'm surprised anybody could have made it in.
Yeah, actually, we got to wait on customers. There were a couple customers, and so he said, "Go ahead and wait on them." So we did, and there was I don't know what it was called, but right beyond the Majestic Theater there, if you look, right in about there, the very next door, there was a photography place there. I think it was the very next door, a stationery place, and they developed photographs. And the guy took pictures right after this, and he sold his pictures afterwards. And some of these closer ones may be from his collection, but I bought a set of his pictures because I didn't have a camera at the time. And he took pictures when right after the snow. It was more like this one up here in the right-hand corner, just everything was covered. I frankly feel that 1950 was the worst of the blizzards. I was through the 1978 one, and in my end of town, 1950 was the worst.
Well, apparently it was the second highest as far as snowfall goes, but I know that there was a lot of schools were closed for several days, which I'm sure the kids were happy about. And they said, you know, that was supposed to be the beginning of the holiday shopping season, so people couldn't quite get out to get to that. So we've got some. These are great pictures of like limestone.
Natalie?
And yeah.
This is Randy. My in-laws were at a game at Ohio State when that blizzard started.
Yep. There you go.
That's the next.
They had to drive home in it, and they often talked about that, how bad the weather was.
That's the next slide, Randy. The Snow Bowl was the famous game that I know. I think Ski might still be on here. He said that he knows people that were there. That's one of those ones where lots of people say that they were there.
Hey, Natalie.
My two sisters, Natalie, were at Wittenberg at the Delta Zeta house at that time, and they couldn't go home or anywhere for Thanksgiving. They had to stay in the house and eat peanut butter. But some of the guys across the street were still there, so that helped too, I think. there was a fraternity over there.
Natalie.
Yeah, Terry.
Yeah, this is Terry. I was at that game, but I was only 1 year old. And
really?
Well, Dad, I think, sat inside the stadium, but Mom and I were in the car.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, are you one of these bundled up people in the picture here?
I was bundled up in the car with Mama.
I know that they talked to Thor Ronimus about it, and he says he remembers they were getting dressed in the locker room at halftime, and they didn't realize that it had started snowing much harder. And the athletic director came in and let them decide if they wanted to finish playing. They said, sure, let's do it. And when they finally went out on the field, they couldn't believe how bad it was. They said they'd never seen a storm like that. But that's one of those ones where they know there was about 50,500 fans there, but it's always twice as many people say that, oh, we were at that day. Yeah. This is a picture that we used to have on our mantle of Thor that he signed for my husband, because he was a lawyer downtown, and my husband would see him at the courthouse sometimes, and he gave him this picture. We love that. But yeah, the Snow Bowl, that's one of those stories. It's a good one out there. These pictures show Western School out on West Main Street. It's now a parking lot over there, I think near the Salvation Army building. But on January 4th, 1954, there was a fire there, and the students had just returned from Christmas break, and a lot of them had brought their favorite presents to show and tell. And when the fire was reported at about a little bit before 11, they all had to leave everything behind and go outside. But the teachers led everybody to safety. Most of the classrooms were untouched, but there was a lot of water and smoke damage. We know that there was a lot of onlookers for this one, and there was people from Box 27 Associates out there to help with that. And Box 27, the group that helps the fire department during big fires, they are actually named for the firebox that was out by the East Street Shops area, is where they get the Box 27 name. But we know that after the school had to close because of the fire, the older students were sent to Fry and the younger students went to Bushnell. And then a section of the school was later moved to Roosevelt Middle School down on North Limestone to use for band practice and orchestra. So some of it remained. And that was actually a school that had been, this is 54. There was a big school building program in the early 50s where a lot of the schools were being replaced. This is one of the last schools that was supposed to be replaced, but due to construction delays, students stayed in it an extra year. So there really shouldn't have been students in there at that time. So it wasn't that huge a deal for them to move them because they'd already been planning to split them out. This is 1956, September 15th. There was a fire at the King building, which was it's a parking lot now, but it's the building next to where the State Theater was. So it was between the old RQ building, which is gone, and then there was another building by the state. And it had a lot of different stores there, like People's Outfitting was there. There was Wade Optical. Peter's Record Shop. There was a Lowe's Brothers Paints in there. And the fire was at night. You can see from this picture here, at about 11 o'clock on Saturday, when the fire was found. By the time the firemen arrived, there was flames shooting out the second floor windows. They cut off the electricity to the building to avoid short circuits. And the IWF was the one next, a little further down on the other side of the state. They've been hosting a meeting of women that were still there at late, that had to evacuate. And Box 27 Associates was on the scene there to help out with a mobile lunch stand. And they said that people said that the heat from the flames could be felt a half a block away, and sparks were shooting high in the air. You guys, anyone remember this fire downtown?
I can remember that fire too, and I'm trying to remember though which one of those buildings between the state and where the hub is there was People's. Was it the first big one, or was it the smaller one beside the state? Does anybody remember that? I know we bought a lot of furniture, the People's Outfitting, and Capples on East High Street too. Yeah. People's and Capples.
I think I can see it. Yeah. Okay. It's this building further down, the white one.
That one?
Yeah, it's
okay.
People's.
Okay. Thank you.
Here's another bridge collapse. This was November 1957. The bridge that goes across Limestone, goes across Buck Creek at Limestone. No one was injured. Luckily, no one was on the bridge at the time, but telephone service was disrupted to 10,000 people. And there was a couple of drivers that had just made it across the bridge when it collapsed. At that time, an engineering firm had recently served the 5 Springfield bridges along the creek and had declared that the North Limestone one was the safest. So they had not had immediate plans to replace this one. So turns out they were wrong.
I can also remember that one because that was the year I went to the Girl Scout National Convention, and when this happened, I went to Philadelphia telling the people that drove their cars all this exciting news about this bridge falling in, and they already had heard about it on national TV, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
It was on national TV about this bridge going down. So I didn't have any new exciting news for them. And I flew, that was my first flight in an airplane. It was a Martin airplane. Martin airplane.
Not the same Martin that made guitars, is it?
I don't think so.
That's the only Martin I know of.
It was an old enough airplane that I had to enter through the tail section. You went in the rear end of the plane to go in it. And I flew from Springfield to Philadelphia.
Wow. From Springfield Airport?
No, I don't think it was from Springfield Airport. It was from Dayton. Yeah.
Well, this one was anniversary was also this week. Dick was talking about this earlier. The January 1959 flood, which affected a large chunk of Ohio. I'm from Northeast Ohio. I don't think it was a big deal up there, but I have friends. When I first moved down here, that's when I learned about a lot of floods and things that I hadn't learned about in Northeast Ohio because they didn't really affect us so much up there. But I have friends from the Portsmouth area, and I visited them where they, along their flood walls, they have the high water marks there in Portsmouth to show how high they were. But this is a pretty good, I think, estimate showing how high the water is. I thought showing it here at Snyder Park at the playground.
Natalie,
yeah.
Our daughter was born on January 28th.
Oh, goodness.
And I think I was in the hospital 5 days. And I believe it was the day he came and brought me home from the hospital. And he decided I needed to see the floodwaters. and he took me on Harshman, which had water on it.
Oh my gosh.
And it went from Harshman on down into the park. And that would have been about February 2, maybe February 1. It was still,
oh man.
it was still flooded up there.
Oh, I bet you our house.
I was scared because I figured
water.
I'd get stuck in the water or the mud or whatever. And there I am with a brand newborn, and you didn't have seats for the babies then. You carried them.
Oh, good. Well, I know we live right by the park now, and seeing pictures like this, I'm like, oh, I'm really glad that we have the reservoir now.
Okay, go ahead.
It keeps things like this.
Okay, go ahead.
From happening.
Your house would have been dry.
Yeah, I think we're up a hill enough. But there was 7 to 8 inches of rainfall within a 12-hour period for this storm here, and the soil was still frozen from it being very cold in January, so the runoff couldn't be absorbed there. This was above the levels of the 1929 flood one either, and the damages in Springfield for the state were 100 million and about 7 million for the city of Springfield. And we've got some more from the newspaper here.
Okay.
Natalie,
yeah.
you go back to that last slide. Yeah. Now, what you're looking at in the background,
those buildings.
you see like a wall there. Well,
Yeah.
that's not a wall. That's the DT&I tracks, and that's how deep the water was, almost over those tracks.
Oh my goodness! And those are the elevated tracks.
Right.
Yeah. Oh wow. I couldn't quite myself figure out where this picture had been taken until now. So yeah, I know that whenever there's a big rain, we will drive through and we'll see sometimes the water gets all the way up under the up to close to under that bridge there.
That picture right there had to have been taken, I think, off of the green bridge that goes from the playground to the other part of the park.
Okay. So that first green bridge, not the one that's by the golf course.
Right.
Huh. Well, this is showing some of the damage in town, more along Buck Creek. That's the Buckeye incubator there. And then this is the A&P supermarket had a lot of interior damage. This is the Springfield Laundry on Murray Street. This was another accident that the anniversary was this past week. This was a train derailment down along Buck Creek on January 19th. 16 cars from the DT&I derailed because there was railroad spikes had loosened from the thawing of the icy ground, and it was between Fountain and Wittenberg that they came off at. This is a really good view of it, showing all the cars along in the bridge up here. I sent one to the paper that they used for a then and now, because I had a hard time figuring out where they could get a good now picture. And I was afraid if I sent him, this is a good picture, but I was afraid if I sent it to them that poor Bill Leckie wouldn't be able to find a way to get that picture, because I think this is on top of a roof of some building over there that doesn't exist anymore. So he wouldn't be able to get that picture.
What year was that again?
It was 1972.
Okay.
I know that this one made for a pretty difficult cleanup to get down there to the river to lift the cars out. And then this is the one that everybody seems to have a story for. We're still outside my realm of memory, but the 78 blizzard is everybody has stories. So I'm sure you guys do. This picture here shows on that date, the 26th, when things were getting bad in town. Shows the Marketplace Heritage Center building here on the right here, all blustery, and on the other side there you can see the fencing from where they were. The new city building was under construction. But we're now at 45 years past the blizzard. The newspaper immediately after was, running all sorts of pictures, but they were asking people to submit their own pictures and stories and things for the special section that lots and lots of people have copies of, the Blizzard edition that came out in a month later in February, that included lots of the pictures from the Blizzard and people's stories and advertisements from the different companies that had stayed open and helped people and all of that. And I see here that you could clip and mail in to request extra copies for $1 each. So now I understand now why everybody is always offering us copies of this newspaper, because a lot of people must have bought it.
Natalie, one of the things that was very prominent at that time was Bob Yance was very active at WBLY, and he organized all kinds of activity with people who had snowmobile type machinery and everything to go out and help people in the community. And he helped numerous people out of different plights during that storm. And he was quite instrumental in the success of the rescues that were taken care of.
I know his grandson had recordings from him on the air that he had shared with us in previous programs where we focused just on the Blizzard. I had shared those clips there, but we still have those out online where people can listen to. I just played snippets of them that we have the whole time he's on the air, talking to people, people calling in saying, we need food here, we need transportation here, and he was helping coordinate all that. So this picture here shows some of that, the people in town that were helping deliver to people that needed it, groceries. And this is, someone that had a lot easier transportation to get around, that could get, I've heard stories of, nurses needing to get to and from work and other medical personnel. You can see just as like today, everybody freaks out and runs to the grocery store and buys everything. The bread section of the grocery store is completely empty. I went to Kroger yesterday just to get something for work, and I was like, why is the parking lot so packed? And I went in and I got the one thing that I needed to get for work. And then I sat in my car and I'm like, oh, should I have bought something if there's a bad store? And I was like, no, it'll be fine. And I'm glad that today was not what everybody said it was going to be.
It didn't turn into much of a storm in this area anyway.
It really didn't. But everybody was out there preparing for it yesterday, if you judge by the Kroger on East Main that I ran into. So I really like this picture here that shows Main Street with the Memorial Hall in the background, because it took me forever to figure out that was Memorial Hall in the snow. Because I was like, what building is that? Here we have Smiling Bob up there with other people from WBLY. They collected more than $42,000 over 2 weeks to help people and distribute stuff through the Salvation Army. This is a great picture of limestone, showing no traffic, but people, a guy with his dog. So lots of great pictures from that, and lots of stories, I'm sure. The last one here was one that we were never able to determine if this is a local picture, but it came from that Frank Braun collection. We know that the pictures from the 20s or 30s, and he was a local photographer that was active then. He later lived in South Charleston and then was in Springfield and ran Baker's Cafeteria. But a lot of the disaster photos we have are from him. Unfortunately, we have not been able to figure out where this one was taken, but it looks like a pretty nasty ice storm that I'm glad we haven't had to deal with anything like that anytime recently with that amount of ice. I thought I'd end with this one. This one's still a mystery, but someday we might run across it and say, that's where it was, or realize that it's not local at all. That's all I have in the way of pictures. If you guys have any more stories or anything you'd like to share, you can.
No, but thank you. You did a good job, Natalie.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Natalie.
I'll stop sharing my screen so I can.
Thank you for
Natalie.
coming in.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you
well,
for
thank-
coming in downtown to.
Oh yeah,
visit
no
us.
problem. I mean, I'll be back tomorrow because the weather's going to be good. I just kind of enjoyed a snow day with my kids today because they had the day off.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys for coming. And if you have any ideas for our next presentation, send them my way. We've got lots and lots of pictures and stories and things that we can share. It's just a matter of pulling them together and figuring out what to talk about. So we take requests, we take suggestions. I prefer them so we don't all have to think about them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe and warm wherever you are.